Oh no, Devo. Heidi ho, how's it go? Today we are rating and ranking the 9 studio albums by Devo from Akron, Ohio. The last ranking I did was The Breeders, also from Ohio, who coincidentally covered a Devo song, Gates of Steel. I'm joined today by Vanessa of the YouTube channel Let It V. Vanessa is a hero in the Taste Like Music community we both belong to. She is the Discord moderator and she makes the music games we play run smoothly. Welcome, Vanessa. Glad you could join me today.
Thanks for having me, Rich. Happy to be here.
Great. All right, so Devo has roots going all the way back to the 60s when it began as a joke about de-evolution, the concept that humans are regressing instead of evolving. After the Kent State Massacre in 1970, they started taking the idea seriously. They eventually started making music and performing, with their first single, Mongoloid, coming out in 1977 on an independent label. Soon they signed to Warner Brothers, and their debut album came out in 1978. So my first experience with Devo was probably the Whip It single, which I loved. It came out when I was 10. I remember listening to Oh No, It's Devo at a kid's house at one point when I was quite young. It wasn't until much later as an adult that I picked up the debut on CD. I also had a copy of Freedom of Choice on tape. I don't think I heard much of anything else until Something for Everybody came out, which I heard at the time. I liked Devo, but never really considered myself a fan. Vanessa, what is your past experience with Devo?
Well, I'd say I probably heard Whip It first too. It was played on Much Music, which is like our Canadian MTV. They did a lot of throwback weekends when I was a kid, so that's when I would have seen that one first. But they also played a version of Jocko Homo that came before they signed with Warner Brothers, I think. It's like an independent film they made, and they cut it into a music video, and they play that too. So those two songs I was most familiar with.
Hmm,
Up until the last few years, I would have listened to the debut and Freedom of Choice. I also heard Oh No, It's Devo when we died the year 1984, a couple years ago. So, but that was all I knew beforehand.
okay, so most of this is new listening for you.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay, well, you are the guest. Would you like to kick things off with number 9?
Sure, I don't know if you're gonna, you might regret this. I don't know how you feel. We haven't talked about it at all, so we'll
Yeah,
see.
I don't know where you're at, so
No.
you're gonna surprise me.
All right. Well, number nine is going to be Total Devo from 1988. Thought the opener, Baby Doll, sounds like it could be almost anyone, if not for the vocals. Late 80s synth pop in a big way, very repetitive. Disco Dancer isn't much different, except they're singing different lyrics that kind of felt very similar between those two songs. I didn't feel like the songs had hooks so much as they just repeat the same few words over and over to the point where you just can't ignore them. So I guess they're catchy in that regard, but it didn't really engage me. The third song, Something's Never Changed, is more of an attempt at something serious, and I felt that fell flat too. I just felt that it ended up being rather dour sounding. And I found myself mentally checking out a bit through Plain Truth, just very generic late 80s sound, which can be rough for me, I admit. Happy Guy is more of the same. This cover of Don't Be Cruel is pretty ill-advised. I felt like they did that a little too much throughout their career, was go back with these older covers. It just didn't always seem necessary. The cheap sounding 80s arrangement does nothing for this, especially combined with the throwback vocals. I just was not into that. And yeah, as I go through, it's not a lot of positive things to say about the album. Felt that Agitated was generic. I felt like they were kind of running out of things to say. Yeah, I don't really know what they were going for at this point, and it really wasn't a good album, I thought at all. There's absolutely nothing appealing about it to me. I didn't need a second version of Some Things Never Change, or the first version, really. Just feels like they were bankrupt of any ideas at this point. Not technically terrible, but there's nothing about it that's really any good to me. So it ends up being bad, but not in a particularly fun way. I thought that their bad stuff was going to be more fun bad than it ended up being. So it felt a little insulting by the end. So that's 2 stars for me for the bottom.
All right. Well, that's makes sense to me. It's not my bottom though. Mine is Smooth Noodle Maps. It's from 1990, their eighth studio album. Opening song Stuck in a Loop begins with some cool drums and then a pretty bitchin' synth rhythm bed slides in. But from there, it soon turns to shit. This is easily Devo's worst album for me. It's the only album that has truly awful songs, in my opinion. Second track, Postmodern Man, is dismal, just overly repetitive, rote vocals, such a lame song. Even worse is Jimmy, which features rudimentary, lowest common denominator songwriting. There are actually a couple songs I consider good. When We Do It is a cheesy song about sex, which I think is kind of fun. And then Devo Has Feelings Too actually rocks. It's been a while since we had this much guitar on a Devo album, but sadly the guitars can't overcome the lameness. The decision to cover Mountain Dew, made famous by the Grateful Dead, is definitely a what the fuck moment. But I do like the song, and this version is okay. It's kind of lame, but sort of passable. Elsewhere, Pink Jazz Trancers is pretty lame until we get to the surprising piano solo, an instrument I don't believe has ever been used on a Devo album before this. The song picks up a bit at the end, so overall it's passable. But since Smooth Noodle Maps is dominated by lame tracks, I have to get this album a bad rating. I give it 1.5 stars. Pretty bad. The extra half a point is for the two songs I like.
All right. Well, I don't feel so bad then. Smooth Noodle Maps is my next one as well. They were pretty close. Stuck in a Loop again. Yeah, it's pretty generic. It sounds a few years behind for 1990 even, I think. It also wears out its welcome really quickly because it's so repetitive. You literally feel like you're stuck in a loop. And Postmatter Man, yeah, I agree though, it's pretty bad as well. Um, and they were the 2 songs that they chose as singles. So when I was listening to it in real time, I was like, if these are the 2 they chose as singles, I am not looking forward to the rest of this album. Um, so I felt like Postmodern Man sounded like TV bumper music or a commercial from around that time more than a song that I'd actually choose to listen to. Yeah, so it was pretty bad. When We Do It is fine for what it is. It's in one ear and out the other. I found it to be generic, and that was more the issue I had near the end there, is that they just got really generic. And it was just big bombastic 80s pop music and disappointing when you consider the image of them being so creative and interesting, especially at the beginning. Um, and it was clear that what made Devo appealing at their best is long gone by this point. Any quirkiness present feels forced, and it's just not coming from a place of creativity. Morning Dew, that cover, that trope wore out a long time ago at this point. Like, I really wish they didn't keep doing that throughout, but unfortunately they did. Seeing the title of how they spelt Change is Gonna Come immediately made me groan for the spelling of come. I was like, oh my gosh, why? This is so cheesy. I was really hoping it wasn't a cover. Thank God it was not a cover of the Sam Cooke song because that would have been scary. Um, and it just was another song where too much is happening to really find anything to get into it. And with it, like it was just a lot of noise, really. Um, Jimmy had some elements that in the instrumentation that kind of called back to their older stuff, which could have been interesting if the song wasn't so bad, but unfortunately it just didn't work out. Um, I was expecting Devo Has Feelings Too to be horrible just from the title, but I didn't hate it. It was, at least it was a different sound. And Doghouse had a stupid spelling again, but it's not the worst song in the world. So at this point in their career, I'm having no fun listening to their music. I said at the time I thought it might be slightly better, but not by much. It was clear that the best years were behind them, and this was a wise stuff, sorry, a wise spot to hang it up for a while at this point. They made the right choice by stopping here for a good 20 years. So yeah, 2 stars for this as well.
Okay, yeah, well, I think we're about on the same page for Smooth Noodle Maps and Total Devo, because Total Devo is my number eight. We just switched places.
Yeah.
It's from 1988, their seventh studio album. After the dismal performance of the Shout album, Warner Brothers offered to dissolve their contract, which Devo accepted. Total Devo didn't come out until 4 years later on the Enigma label. They shouldn't have bothered because this is a decidedly lame album. There are occasionally some cool sounds, some interesting electronic percussion, but none of that can save the lackluster songs. The singer imitates Elvis on the lame opener Baby Doll and really hams it up on the Elvis cover Don't Be Cruel. It's mildly amusing to hear that song devofied, but ultimately it's pretty lame. Maybe half of this album could pass as decent, but that's not nearly enough to give the album a decent rating. The one song that could possibly pass as good is The Shadow, which reminds me of The Power of Love by Huey Lewis and the News. The rest is pretty unremarkable. They are not as robotic on this album and not as interesting either. 2.25 stars for Total Devo.
All right, so interesting to see where we go from here. My number 7 is Shout from 1984. My immediate reaction to the opening title track is that there's a lot going on production-wise. Sounds, voices, big synths. You could say that the song is aptly named, but ultimately it has a pretty annoying vibe. Everything about this album so far at this point is obnoxiously slick. Everything is echoing. I mean, it's not horrible, but it wasn't a sound I wanted to hear. The Satisfied Mind is not a bad song at its core, but the production is rather off-putting, ruins it a bit. Don't Rescue Me is so aggressively synthy that it's almost comical. It veers into self-parody, which so far is a theme here, and I think that's what I was reacting to more than even the songs being bad. It was just so over the top. Almost sounds like music that a synth pop band in a Saturday morning cartoon would make. Was the reaction I had to it. The fourth dimension is less cartoony, but still very sonically cluttered, like they're trying out every button on the synthesizer all at once. There's an interesting random callback to Day Tripper in there, though. That was kind of cool. Come On is fine and catchy, a little less over the top, but still plenty of synths. But I mean, it was 1984, so made sense. Here to Go is a strange choice for a single, not really that catchy. Feels like it has an odd lack of energy, which was a problem I had with them in this era a bit. Jurisdiction of Love is another song that falls into the trap of having way too much happening all at once, which is a big problem for them in the 80s. Puppet Boy veers straight into cartoon territory once again. They've always had a sense of humor and quirkiness to them. You wouldn't want them to be too serious because that doesn't work either. But they get to a point where they just read as silly and kind of out of ideas, and I think this is where that really is apparent. Please, Please might be better without the skittering electronic drums and random bursts of synth that seem at odds with everything else, but not very good. The Jimi Hendrix cover at the end is odd, but not off-brand for them. It's a pretty weird choice for a lead single, though, for the album. It just felt like they were just kind of throwing things at the wall to see what would stick at this point. It reminded me of rubber balls bouncing off the wall in music form. But despite my many criticisms of this album, I didn't think it was complete garbage. It was just very misguided. I think they just didn't know what to do at this point, and it really showed. And it really I guess it would fit into what they were working towards and the sounds of the times, and it could be worse, but it also could be a lot better. So 2.5 for that album.
All right. Yeah, that's my number seven, Shout from 1984, their sixth album. This isn't a bad album, it's decent. However, the songs are noticeably weaker than previous outings, despite the use of new equipment like the Fairlight CMI. This album has a rather standard Devo sound, which is a bit tired by this point. But as always, there are some cool sound effects. It sounds like they may have taken a few cues from Depeche Mode, and Depeche Mode were known for using the Fairlight. There's only one truly weak track for me, and that would be the fourth dimension. And it does repeatedly use the Day Tripper riff, and I just think it sounds lame in this context. Um, I'm not entirely sure what to make of their cover of Are You Experienced? It's sort of cool and lame at the same time, you know? And I actually have that reaction about a lot of Devo's music when I think about it. Um, the song does have a big rock beat going for it. The video is off the hook. I don't know if you saw the video, but Jimi Hendrix jumps out of a coffin to do a guitar solo and then jumps back in. So crazy. They took a lot of heat for that one. And but as far as the album goes, repetition is certainly an aspect of Devo's music, but they often add a twist in the repetition, so it's not pure repetition. Let's see. Here we go. Jurisdiction of Love and Puppet Boy are the three songs I would consider to be genuinely good. Everything else I haven't mentioned is just mid. So 3 stars for Shout. It's just okay.
All right. Well, number 6 for me will be Oh No, It's Devo from 1982. I'd heard this one a few years ago, as I said before, and at that time I gave it a pretty low rating, and I couldn't totally remember why, though. I was just like, I don't know if I was having a bad day or whatever, so we'll see. I was curious to revisit it. Um, Thought that the opener, Time Out for Fun, was a bit silly, but not bad. Kind of slight as a song, but not offensive. And Peekaboo harkened back to their earlier music with the vocal effects, but was worse than the stuff that they made before. It sounded like a band out of ideas, which is a reoccurring theme here. It just sounds like they're doing everything to make the song as obnoxious as they can.
Hmm.
Um, they really get into the synths here. Out of Sync is okay, very synth heavy, but repetitive. Not unpleasant though. As soon as the intro for explosions start, my immediately thought is this is already exhausting. Feels like a lot of sounds are added in to distract from the fact that there isn't really much to that song. I did think that That's Good was the best song here at that point, a much better choice for a single than Peekaboo. I think it kind of reminded me of Sparks from around the same time period, so that was pretty good. Was okay as well. The synths are loud and chunky, but at least they're catchy. It's nice to hear some guitar too at this point. I think a big issue with listening to this that is that after a while the songs start to feel very similar to each other. Big synths, some chanting and repeated lyrics, and it just becomes exhausting. Speed Racer is just annoying with the put on voices and the same nonsense lines repeated over and over again. Sounds like something some kids wrote in an afternoon. And yeah, it's okay. I think the big issue with the album is that it just feels incredibly repetitive and uninspired, which would begin obviously a long period where they were going through that issue with their albums. The songs seemed half written, relying on synths and effects to add interest to them, but just nothing there at the core. So I do think I was a little harsh on it initially when I first heard it. I still think it's the weakest album, obviously, to this point chronologically, and I think they needed a break. I think they were putting out too much in a short period of time, especially after having a big, probably a bit unexpected hit with Whip It. I think continually trying to capitalize on that, and it just hurt them over time. So 3 stars for this. It's okay. Better than I thought before.
All right. My number six is Something for Everybody. Their most recent album, it's from 2010, their ninth album. Arriving precisely 20 years after their last album, Something for Everybody is an impressive return. While it can't compete with peak Devo, it is a worthy addition to the canon. Fresh is a very good opener, and I can't tell if I'm hearing a guitar or a synth, so that's cool. The pre-choruses are a bit rote, but they're not a huge liability. The synth bass is cool. Second track, What We Do, is also very good. It's basically about the things we all do over and over that harm the environment, which will lead to de-evolution. Please Baby Please has a rockabilly beat and a decent guitar solo. The synth intro is cool, and while it is a rather rote song, I dig the whoa whoa part. Don't Shoot Me, I'm a Man is a key song here, portraying an advanced stage of de-evolution, which we are actually pretty close to right now, I would say. I dig the escalating notes, dialing up the tension. It's a very cool song, if not the greatest song musically. Mind Games sounds like an old school arcade game. It's just okay. The lyrics containing the title of the album appear on Something, a very good song that uses the drums from Whip It. Late is Now is kind of trippy, one of the best songs, and I relate to the lyrics that go, if you don't want trouble, you should stay at home. Then we get the song No Place Like Home, which benefits from some modern production. It's a good pro Earth tune. Unfortunately, the weakest song is the last one called March On, which has some cool squelchy synth sounds, but the lyrics are too cheesy and I'm just not buying it. Still, all things considered, this is a late in the game return to form, a low-key triumph. 3.5 stars.
Right, that's next for me. Number 5, Something for Everybody. Fresh starts things off on a super positive and encouraging note. It feels like a callback to their freedom of choice era, which was a good choice. It's catchy new wave number that works with newer technology to revisit that early 80s sound, and I think it works quite well. It's the first song by them I can say that I actually like in like 4 or 5 albums at that point. So it was a it was a big triumph. It could only go down from there, unfortunately. What we do is not on the same level, unfortunately, but it does make sense to mix it up. Reminds me of the eras that I am not a fan of the 80s, but mixed with a more modern sound. It's not terrible, but not great to me. Please Baby Please has a rhythm that reminds me of Adam and the Ants, and I think that sounds pretty cool, actually. Worked pretty well. Don't Shoot, I'm a Man is pretty goofy, but somehow just toes the line between fun goofy and cringe goofy in a way that a lot of the 80s stuff didn't. So that was pretty cool. It seems like a subtle line for them, and maybe the fact that they aren't going for a hit here helps the writing process for them, that they're more relaxed in this 20 years later down the line. Human Rocket is enjoyable and catchy. I think that they do a good job on this album of blending modern technology with that 80s influence sound, and it works for them. It doesn't sound like it was made by anyone else. It still sounds like Devo, just in a new era. Cameo is a low point. I didn't really like how anything on that song sounded. Annoying production and effects, as well as a meh song as its bass. Thankfully, at that point, it seemed like a temporary blip. But then, as the album went on, kind of fell apart for me a little bit. No Place Like Home. I didn't like the more modern dance sounds. I didn't think they worked very well with them, and I thought that it sounded like it was just a little too generic for me. March On amplifies that issue, and it isn't a good way to close the album, like you said. It really puts things out on a sour note. Ultimately, this album is better than I expected. I was really not sure what to expect at this point because I was not having the greatest time. So I was like kind of dreading listening to this album, but I think that they turned it around and I'm glad that they did it. It's not without its issues, and it starts more strongly than it ends. And it's not really consistent enough to fully call good for me, but it is a step in a better direction. And I think it was worth them doing. I'm glad that they ended their career. If they make nothing else, they end their career with this instead of smooth noodle maps. Definitely a positive. So it's still 3 stars, but it was a nice surprise at the same time.
Yeah, I get it. And I remember that cameo song, Cameo, so dorky. All right, so we're at number five. I've got New Traditionalists. It's from 1981, their fourth studio album. This is a collection of mostly good songs, but nothing here is truly outstanding to me. The bouncy opener, Through Being Cool, is moderately amusing. It definitely sounds like they're not trying to be cool. We get plenty more synth bass and synth blasts on this album, and they get a little more creative with the percussion. There's not much in the way of guitar here, but the weakest song, called The Super Thing, has a decidedly lame guitar solo. The best track, Beautiful World, also has a guitar solo, but that one's better. Beautiful World offers lots of praise for the world we live in, but there's a twist at the end when the singer claims it's not a beautiful world to him. New Traditionalists continues their main theme of de-evolution, but it's less satirical and more straightforward this time around. The album ends with Enough Said, which is very good. It's also quite repetitive, but the repetition somehow works for me when Devo does it. 3.5 stars for this one.
All right. Now, this is where I don't know. I might lose people with this one, with my number four, but we'll see. Duty Now for the Future from 1979 is my number four. I gave this one a couple chances. It feels like it's really well regarded, but I don't know. Anyway, I'll get to that. Clock Out, I thought was a decent first actual song. Obviously, there's that little short instrumental at the beginning. I thought that conceptually the two worked together really well, but it didn't feel like the most natural transition to me musically. So that threw me off a little bit. Timing X is the second instrumental short piece in the first 5 minutes. Not sure that does much for the momentum of the album, and that you didn't love that choice. Wiggly World is not bad, but it still feels like I'm waiting for this album to really get going, which was a bit of the issue I had. I like the guitar on Blockhead, but I still struggle to feel much from that song itself. Strange Pursuit was probably my favorite song on that album to that point, but it still had this frustrating lack of spark, which was the main theme of this album for me and why it ended up where it did. It's that song was the closest thing I heard to some true energy, um, but it still just wasn't enough. Swell SIB, Swell Itching Brain has that quirk from the first album, but I'm still feeling this detachment that, as I've said, has been frustrating me throughout the entire album. Triumph of Will left me cold, but I did think that The Day My Baby Gave Me a Surprise was a little bit more promising. I felt that Pink Pussycat felt quite forced, which was a theme, obviously. Secret Agent Man was their cover. It was kind of cool. At this point, hadn't been tired out by this whole cover trope at that point yet, but wasn't as good as Satisfaction. They kind of maybe should have just done that once and left that idea alone. I did think that Smart Patrol and Mr. DNA had some cool synth work, and it was a little more interesting than some of the songs. And I thought that Red Eye was a strong closer, so it did turn itself around a bit near the end. But I just felt that overall, I didn't dislike the album at all. It just was frustrating. It sounded good. There was nothing bad about it, but it feels like it was missing the spark and inspiration that was present on the first album. And it makes sense because they made this not long after the debut. And the songs from the debut, they'd had those in their arsenal for years. They'd had lots of time to perfect them. And then they had to do this one rather hastily afterwards, I think. So I felt it really showed. And it was more of a transition to a more pop forward sound, but they hadn't totally nailed it down yet. But still, it goes to a light 3.5 here. I still think it's pretty good. It's just I'm not feeling that love for it that I see elsewhere. So I don't know. I'm obviously missing something on that one.
Okay, all right, good stuff, Vanessa. So my number four is also Duty Now for the Future. It's from 1979, their second album. For me, this is an unusual album. The first side didn't do a whole lot for me musically, despite some cool synth sounds, some interesting bells and whistles. By the time we get to Triumph of the Will, I'm getting a bit tired of the robotic aesthetic. But then we get the next track, The Day My Baby Gave Me a Big Surprise, which I think is comparable to the best songs on the debut. Great synths, and Pink Pussycat for me is also excellent, although I can see how someone might find it creepy. Secret Agent Man, I think, is a cool cover. Like Satisfaction, Devo ditches the main guitar riff, but keeps the chorus. Smart Patrol Mr. DNA starts off pretty cool, but then transforms into something very cool. There's some wickedly corrosive synth sounds on there. The last track, Red Eye, begins with more corrosive, rude synth sounds. It's a very repetitive track, but it works for me. So, Duty Now for the Future was headed for three-star territory until it got really good on the second side. So, I'm at another 3.5 stars. It qualifies as a good album.
So I guess next I have the New Traditionalists from 1981 for number three. At first, I think I actually had them flipped. When I went back to them again, I did end up putting this one ahead a little bit. Um, my initial impression of the opener through being cool is that it's just a little too on the nose, but it is a catchy song. Very big 80s synths. Seems like an obvious attempt at making a single for the record company. It doesn't quite have the magic of the singles on the previous album, of course, but it's better than what they do later on, so that's something. I like jerking back and forth better. It seems like a more natural evolution from freedom of choice, so that was a bright spot. Pity You is pretty decent, but nothing to get too excited about. So that's when I think the album started to sort of waver a little bit. Soft Things just sounds rather messy and cluttered, and I just didn't really get that much out of it. Going Under has a bit of that element as well, but it does have a cool beat and a main synth line, so that was better. Race of Doom has a big bombastic sound, mechanical. Again, it seems to have the problem of everything but the kitchen sink approach, and that's a reoccurring theme of the 80s, of course, as we've said. Um, Really drags the song down. Like sometimes too much is not better. Although this is something it just, like we said, just definitely gets much worse later on. It's sort of the beginnings of it here. Love Without Anger, though, is one of the better songs here. I really like that one. That was pretty close to making my top 10 list. It didn't quite get there, spoiler alert, but it's a good one. Beautiful World is a decent single. Like you said, the songs do seem to be more fleshed out in this part of the album. All the same, it does fall a little flat, but it's still good. Enough Said is okay as a closer. Nothing about this album is bad, really. But much like Duty Now for the Future, it feels like they're making a follow-up to the previous album just a little too soon. They wanted to do something different from Freedom of Choice here, which is understandable. But I'm not sure it's really that different. Like I read about them trying to do something different, but it didn't feel that much different to me. Other than that, it felt like it was weaker and less streamlined songwriting. So that's not a good different. That magic touch is missing for me. But there are some highlights, and none of those come quite as close to my favorite moments from Freedom of Choice, but I still prefer this to everything else they did after Freedom of Choice. So that puts it here at number three and in at 3.5 stars.
3.5, all right. All right. So, my number three is one I like more than you did. Oh no, it's Devo from 1982, their fifth album. They chose the name of this album because that's the kind of negative reaction a lot of people had to a new Devo album, which I think is hilarious. The synths are dominant as ever, and I do love the synth sounds. Synthesizer is probably my favorite instrument. This album is as high as it is because it is very consistent for me. Every song here is at least good to some degree, while the weakest track, I Desire, is still pretty good. Strangely, that song began as a creepy poem written by John Hinckley Jr., the man who attempted to assassinate Ronald Reagan in his effort to impress Jodie Foster. Talk about a crazy dude. There's only one song here I consider to be excellent, and that would be Big Mess, which is just a fun song that takes it over the top for me. Explosions is very good, seemingly about sex. It turns into a critique of the music industry and fans who don't get what Devo is about. For me, that's good, and Speed Racer are very good. Quirky sounds and synth effects abound, providing effective counter melodies. A fun album. 3.75 stars.
All right. We're into the top two now. I'm gonna go with question, Are We Not Men? Answer, We Are Devo from 1978 is my number two. The opening song, Uncontrollable Urge, it kicks things off with a lot of infectious energy. It's the perfect way to start the album and kickstart their debut. Fantastic, really gets you into the swing of things. Their cover of I Can't Get No Satisfaction isn't necessarily my favorite thing, but I appreciate the approach they take with the song here and how it's deconstructed and then reconstructed in a lot of ways. Really cool. The guitar tone on Praying Hands is really cool. It has a bit of a surf rock vibe to it, which was really neat. Space Junk is a cool song with the subtle spacey vibe without going too far with it. I think they find the balance really well here. Mongoloid is one of their most controversial songs, which also it uses an outdated term, obviously. It's meant to be a positive story about the person in the song. And I think people miss that a lot. It's also a super catchy song. Jocko Homo is the one of the ones I was most familiar with, but I was most familiar with the demo version for a long time, the one that was used in that short film slash music video that I saw when I was younger. So, and they made that before the album. So initially, this more sped up, produced out version of the song threw me off, but I've come to appreciate it a lot more since. And I really, really like the song. Too Much Paranoias expresses the song's subject matter very effectively. And Gut Feeling, Slap Your Mammy, really reminds me of Talking Heads, especially in the vocals, although more so in the gut feeling section. The closing section of this album is really cool, and the different vibe to Shrivel Up reminds me of more of a post-punk style sound. It's a really strong debut that introduces the band and their vision very effectively, while also feeling at home with the growing art rock new wave scene at the time. It seems to have its finger on the pulse of what's going on, which is something they kind of lose their grip on, which is unfortunate because they had it down pat here, I think. The songs are catchy, but also really interesting and quirky in a way that works for them and enhances them without that quirky element getting in the way, which again is a problem they had later on. So this is a 4-star album for me.
All right. Cool beans. Yeah, I think we're gonna finish up on the same page. My number two is Q, Are We Not Men? A, We Are Devo. And that is their debut album. It's from 1978. And I think there's a really good combination of guitars and synths on this one. It was very influential on the new wave movement, but remains uniquely Devo. The robotic, herky-jerky playing is a way of satirizing conformity in society. The album deals with consumer culture and other topics such as dying. Opening song, Uncontrollable Urge, such a great one. Very lively with interesting, unusual playing. The deconstruction of the Stones' Satisfaction is amazing, so robotic. Like I said before, they astoundingly scrapped the famous guitar riff, and it still sounds great. I heard Mick Jagger loves it. Praying Hands is a dig on Christianity and conformity, loaded with cool synth effects. Mongoloid is a fantastic song. Yeah, it's an offensive term according to today's standards, but not really back in 78. I love the guitar and the cool spacey synths. The song is a commentary on the overriding theme of de-evolution. Jocko Homo is essentially Devo's mission statement. It takes the robotic nature of the proceedings to a radical extreme. To be honest, it's too much for me. It's just too repetitive. For me, it's a skipper. Aside from Jocko Homo, the first side is superior to the second, but every song is at least reasonably good. Gut Feeling is excellent, possibly their most rockin' track, and it gets really noisy, especially that guitar. It also has an extended 2 minute intro before the vocals kick in. Come Back Johnny has some rollicking guitar, and last track, Shrivel Up, is a rather harsh song about dying. So this is a landmark album, and I do dig it quite a bit. Uncontrollable Urge, I Can't Get No Satisfaction, and Mongoloid are five-star songs. Most of the rest of the album is very good, but there are a few tracks that hold back the rating, especially Jocko Homo. So I'm at a solid 4 stars for Are We Not Men?
Oh, my number one, obviously, and your number one is Freedom of Choice from 1980. Probably even, well, I'll get to it anyway. So I think that it opens up with just an absolute banger of a song, Girl You Want. Right from the first note is just really what I wanted them to do that whole entire previous album to this is just bring some energy and inspiration. And I think they do exactly that here. It's exactly what you want in an album opener and a pop song in general. It's just a great song. It's just fantastic. It's Not Right is a great transition. The tighter songwriting on this album is immediately apparent. Not much you can really say about Whip It at this point. It's their best known song for a reason. It's a catchy pop song. It's unforgettable. It's just got just enough new wave quirk to feel fresh. And of course, the notoriety around the video didn't hurt, but on its own, it's a fantastic song. Snowball reminds me a bit of the previous album, but more refined. The title track is another highlight for me, very catchy, anthemic song right from the opening notes. I like the guitar being at the forefront of the song and how it works with the synths when they are there. I think that's just great. I also like Gates Steel a lot, which is another great blend of guitar with synths. Cold War and Don't You Know are two more enjoyable songs, the latter having more some fun, spacey synth sounds. That's really cool. I like the switch up on the chorus of That's Pep. It's a cool contrast from the verses. Planet Earth closes things out well. So, yeah, I think this is definitely their most realized statement as an album. Much better songs and energy than the previous album right across the board. And has a great balance of quirky with pop sensibility. It's so sad that they could never do this again to the same level. They have their own personality, but you can sing along. Also, that sense of quirkiness does not overwhelm the album. It fits right in. It's meshes with everything so well. And this is where the positive of the previous two albums really come together, I think. And it's definitely their peak as artists and the pinnacle of their statement of their artistry, I think. And I always have a great time listening to this album. I still have it at 4 stars, but it's like the highest 4 stars. So easy number one.
All right, great. Yeah, like you said, it is my number one as well. It's from 1980. It's their third album. So Devo revamped their sound on Freedom of Choice into something more danceable. This album's secret weapon is the synth bass. Otherwise, their herky-jerky sound remains intact. They're still using guitar as evidenced by the great guitar intro on the opening song, the super catchy Girl You Want. It's Not Right is an exciting follow-up featuring some wild synth surges. Then comes the totally addictive Whip It. Spoiler alert, I think that's their best song, which seems to be about violence and control in society. The video was super controversial, the way Mark Mothersbaugh whips the clothes off of a woman who was tied up. I don't think that would fly today. Devo's de-evolution themes remain a big part of what they're about. I dig the Morse code intro and the Kraftwerk tones of Snowball, while Ton of Love has great synth sounds and a great synth solo. Gates of Steel is another one of their best songs. It's so triumphant sounding. The remaining songs aren't as strong, with Mr. B's Ballroom being the weakest track, although it's still pretty good. Freedom of Choice is neck and neck with the debut, which might have been number one if it wasn't for Jocko Homo. So I'm also at 4 stars for Freedom of Choice. All right. So did you make a top 10 songs?
I did, yeah.
All right,
Um,
great. If you have any honorable mentions, you can mention that as well.
Not really, no.
Okay.
I did kind of in that one song, Love Without Anger. Sorry. Might
Oh,
have to
okay.
cut that down a little bit. Yeah, that would be my own honorable mention.
Okay.
So number 10, I will give to Jerkin Back and Forth from New Traditionalists, the only song from that album. Um, Number 9 is Fresh from Something for Everybody, the only song after New Traditionalists to make this list. Number 8 is Come Back Johnny from the debut. Number 7 is where I have Whip It, which may be controversial, but I don't know. I just like some of the other songs better, but it's pretty undeniable. Number 6, I give to Ton of Love from Freedom of Choice. Number 5 will be Uncontrollable Urge from the debut. And number 4, Freedom of Choice from Freedom of Choice. And number 3, Gates of Steel from Freedom of Choice. Number 2 is where I put Jocko Homo, but not the album version. The Bougie Boy version from the single is because there's like three different versions of it, but that's I think the best version for me. And number 1 is my favorite song by them, and that is Girl You Want from Freedom of Choice. Pretty by a landslide. I love this song. Also one of my top songs of 1980.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I remember you mentioning Girl You Want on your recent video. Um, all right. So my top 10, I'll mention one honorable mention, Pink Pussycat from Dirt Duty Now for the Future. And with that and my top 10, I will have mentioned all of the songs from their studio albums I consider excellent. So 11 excellent songs. Number 10, I've got Gut Feeling, Slap Your Mammy from Are We Not Men. Gets my vote for their most rockin' song. Number 9, The Day My Baby Gave Me a Big Surprise from Duty Now for the Future. Number 8, Ton of Love from Freedom of Choice. At one point, I thought that was about fat people, but I was wrong. Number 7, I've got Big Mess from Oh No, It's Devo. Number 6, I've got Mongoloid from Are We Not Men? Uh, the previous songs were 4.5 stars. Mongoloid is a 5. They're all 5s from here on out. Number 5 is Uncontrollable Urge from Are We Not Men? Number 4, I've got Girl You Want from Freedom of Choice. Like You, I've got Gates of Steel from Freedom of Choice at number 3. My number 2 is I Can't Get No Satisfaction from Are We Not Men? Ordinarily, I would not choose a cover song for an artist, but this one is perhaps the most iconic thing they ever did. And my number one, of course, it's got to be Whip It from Freedom of Choice.
We actually had the same number three and number five.
Oh, number five, too. Cool.
Yeah, kind of funny.
Interesting. All
Yeah.
right. So that was Devo. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I guess that I only really need two albums by them. And I kind of thought that going in, but I wanted to explore it further, and I'm glad I did. But yeah, I think that I would probably only ever go back to those two albums. And they're definitely the only two I would buy physically. But
Yeah.
but they never get like horrible, really. For all the complaining, it could be a lot worse. It's just more disappointing, I think, because especially after Freedom of Choice is so good. Like if they even did that a couple more times, they'd be higher in my estimation overall. But I still think they're really cool as people and, all that. So,
Yeah. I
and their
agree.
mission,
What was
they
that?
I was just going to say they had a lot of interesting ideas in the beginning, especially. It's just too bad we didn't see more of that. But
Yeah, for
the
sure.
record industry, I know, like spits people up and, you know, or sorry,
Yeah.
chews people up and spits them out. And I think they definitely did here. I don't think that Whip It being a hit was probably the best thing for them, unfortunately.
Hmm. Wow. But yeah, I agree that Freedom of Choice and Are We Not Men are the only real essential albums. You can make a great mixtape with the best of the rest, but you don't really need any of the other albums. So, yeah, I think that's it for Devo.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me today, Vanessa, and
Thank you for having me.
thanks to everybody for watching. Peace. Have a good one.
Bye.